Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Apollo's Odyssey. I'm your host, Apolla Asteria, and it's good to be back after a wild holiday season for me. Man, I was in Aspen, I was in Vegas. I was just so glad the holidays are over. I really am. It's fun while it lasts, but it's good to be home. It's good to be back in my studio. I have a lot of projects I'm working on, and I have the some conferences coming up actually that I'm really excited about. I may be going to a conference in Arizona in the middle of this month, and that will be a political conference. Actually, that's in the middle of this month. My bad. It's in the middle of this month. I don't I forgot what it was called, but I will most likely be there in Arizona. So I'll have to figure that out and get back to you guys next week about that. But also, I am going to be at Rob Potter's event in July. I know a lot of you in this community know about that event, the Mount Shasta Conference, I believe it's called. I should have had a link pulled up. I'll make sure I do that on the next show. But if anyone wants to check out that event, that's the main Mount Shasta conference, Rob Potter's Mount Shasta conference. And I will be speaking on that in July 7th. I just got that confirmed. So I'm really stoked about that. And I do need to sell 3 tickets. I need 3 people to buy tickets and say, I don't know if any of my fans out there want to get some tickets. Please buy a ticket and put in the notes. I think there's a note when you buy it or something that you're buying it for because of me, I guess, because I need to supposedly sell 3 tickets. So I don't know. I need to talk to Rob about that. But I'm really excited about that conference. We're gonna have Laura Eisenhower's gonna be there, Samuel Kaiwas, Brad Olson, Eric Dadmere, a lot of homies of mine, so it should be a good time. Definitely be fun. And before that, I actually have the Conscious Life Expo coming up. I know I did a smaller Conscious Life Expo. They had like a mini Conscious Life Expo earlier in the year, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to make it to this bigger one because the last one was a bit of a fiasco for me. I actually got sick and had to just leave my booth and leave everything in the middle of the conference. And but yeah, I actually am going to be doing the big Conscious Life Expo, which will be in Los Angeles in February. I should get the dates on that too. I need to have these links pulled up. So next show I'll let you know when exactly that is, but that is coming up in February. I'll be speaking at it as usual, and I will have my shaman spears at it as usual. And by the way, if you want to help support my show and you want to help fund me and keep me going, it'd be very much appreciated if you check out my shaman spears. I have a new collection out, which is the Yin and Yang collection. They're all handcrafted by yours truly with the intention of channeling energy. I mean, these things are really powerful. They basically amplify energy like times 10. There's copper coils, crystals, magnets, and sand I collect from sacred places around the world down the insides. And just scientifically, they really amplify energy. And this particular collection, I made it with crystals that have properties of balance, especially hematite. I used a lot of hematite in this particular collection, the Yin Yang collection. So you're gonna want to check that out. It's kind of for balancing during these crazy times. A lot of people ask me like, what do I do with this spear? If you're not into energy work, I mean, they're a great tool for energy work. But if you don't do energy work, honestly, my favorite thing to do with them is going hiking with them. I freaking love it. Every time I go on a mountain, I always bring a spear with me. Even if I like go to other countries, I'll try to fit a spear in my bag. Most of the time, I end up doing it. So I definitely recommend doing that with these. It's pretty fun. They're also really cool to just hang from hooks on your walls. They make great, unique gifts. They're painted with crop circles that have been found around the world. And I have tons of organite creations up on here, organite bracelets, some fun little feather headdresses I made myself. And I even have some I Believe in Humans t-shirts with my show logo on the back to help promote my show. I only have so many in this collection. And then once this collection is done, that's the only time these shirts are ever made. So they actually all are very good quality, and they see on the side of them 1 of 30. So when you're getting it, it's 1 of 30 ever made. And it just happens to be the first shirt to promote my show. So who knows, might be worth a lot in the future. So definitely check that out. And again, that's at shamanspears.com. Shamanspears.com. Check it out. All right. I don't know about you all, but I am exhausted from the holidays. I'm still coming up from that. So if I sound a little low on energy today, that might be why. I went and checked out this nightclub in Vegas called Zook, and man, I highly recommend it. And if you're into aliens, the whole UFO thing, this place has like a mothership on the ceiling that moves around with like the sickest lights I've ever seen in my entire life. And I managed to convince the bottle service people to allow me to wear their Dom Perignon Space Girl helmet for a little bit during the night. So that was pretty interesting. I don't know if any of you out there follow me on social media and saw some videos of that, but yeah, that happened. I manifested it. I was like, I see that Space Girl helmet. I want to wear it. I just told her, I was like, hey, can I put that on? They're like, sure, why not? So yeah, I had a pretty wild New Year's, and I'm just glad to be back here in LA. Glad to be getting back to work. I hope to by my next show have a new intro together, because I've had this intro for like a year now. The intro song, I'm still going to keep the same intro song, but for the visual portion of this show, I want to have re-edit my intro and make it a little different because it's a little outdated. So really excited about getting some new projects started, and it should be fun. Also, I am getting back into some acting, so that should be interesting as well. But with all these conferences and my shows, I got a lot going on. Got a lot of projects in the works, and hopefully, I'll have more projects to announce soon here. I don't want to announce them just yet, but I got a lot coming up here. So stay tuned for it all. And so tonight's show, so with Aftermath lately on here on Aftermath FM, I have really kind of just been doing solo shows the last few weeks because I just feel people tend to like them better. And I may have someone to interview again next week, but I really enjoy kind of coming up with these topics and exploring them with you all, kind of making connections with different topics throughout my show. It always just is kind of interesting to me. It's like I'm taking you all on a journey with me and like connecting the dots. And I do go off everyone's comments here, so please continue to comment. And any feedback you have, sometimes it kind of gives me things to go off of. So I really enjoy it. So, like I said, tonight's show again, I'm just going to be a solo show. I really do enjoy just kind of working through these different connections and coming up with a topic for each show and going through it. So tonight's topic is modern science catching up with the Anunnaki technology of Anunnaki Sumerian legend. So I kind of came up with this topic from a show I was in yesterday. There's something that I discussed in a show yesterday, and some articles that have been coming out lately about scientists basically genetically manipulating DNA. I don't know if that's the word for it, to basically bring back extinct woolly mammoths. And, I was just thinking about this and I'm like, oh my gosh, what does this sound like to you? I mean, what does this sound like to you guys? I'm sure most of my audience here is familiar with, ancient aliens, the whole topic of ancient aliens. But I do meet people all the time out and about on my wild adventures that are not into the UFO community at all. And then I get them to subscribe to my show and start watching it. So, to my audience out there that really has known about this stuff for a long time. I'm sorry if I seem a little vanilla at times, but I have to do it because, you know, it's really important that we get disclosure to everyone. And if I'm too over the top with to people in a way that'd be too over the top for someone who is just learning about UFO disclosure, I don't want to freak them out too much. And, so if it sounds like I'm coming off a little vanilla at times, I notice that in my comments, people say that. It's just because I'm, I'm just trying to say everything in a way that is best for a general audience of any person who may be watching from any background. But I go deep sometimes. I do go deep sometimes. Or I go deep as much as I can. Sounds a little wrong, doesn't it? But I do. So I just try to do it in a way that's at least somewhat vanilla. So oh, okay. So, I have a lot of points that I pulled up. I did a lot of research to kind of work this together on tonight's show, but also, a lot of it is just from books that I have read my entire life. I really enjoy researching the topic of ancient aliens before Ancient Aliens was even a show. That was something that was extremely fascinating to me. And that's actually what got me into the whole field of ufology was my fascination with ancient civilizations, secret societies, and lost technologies and mythologies. I was always very into these mythologies from around the world, and I always felt like there was something more to it. That what they were saying, I thought that they weren't just legends. I think they were really, or myths. I thought they were really referring to actual events that these ancient people may have experienced. And I think that's very likely when you take into account, these ancient people, these ancient cultures around the world, they always have these legends or myths of gods coming down and giving them technology, giving them, you know, new ways of farming and knowledge and new ways of building, helping them build. So, I just find this topic extremely fascinating and I always have. So, I guess before I start here, I'll name a few books that most of what I'm saying in tonight's show, if it's not from an article that I'm pulling up here, I have got it from some of these books that I'm about to name now. And I really retain everything I read. I'm the kind of person, if I read something, I just always remember it. And I read a lot. So I usually try to switch between like one day or, I used to actually read an entire novel every night when I was younger. I was that much of a nerd, but I'm not quite on that level anymore. But I like to switch between reading sci-fi and then reading nonfiction. So I'll kind of switch between these two. And it actually so happens that the warehouse that publishes a lot of the people that have been on Ancient Aliens and a lot of researchers in the UFO community, the main publishing house, Adventures Unlimited, actually happens to be an hour outside my hometown in Illinois. So I've read a lot of these authors growing up, and these are just some of the ones that I happen to have with me right now. And the information of what I'm going to be going off of on tonight's show that I'm not reading off an article is retained in my mind from these books that I have read over the years. Some of them I don't actually have with me because a lot of times when I read a book, I end up giving it away to someone and telling them to read it. So, so of course, when it comes to this topic, Zachariah Sitchin, his work, a lot of people have different things to say about Zachariah Sitchin's work. Some people think it's a mistranslation. And of course, if you don't know Zachariah Sitchin's work, this is the Earth Chronicles, and it's actually the supposed legit translation of the Anunnaki or of the Sumerian tablets about the whole story of the Anunnaki and creation and everything. So and it's really wild. It really is. And I've heard, a lot about some of it being mistranslated, but this is what really got that story of the Sumerian tablets out there. So the first one in the series is the 12th planet. Um And it's like basically you can take it as when you read it, it's almost like reading a sci-fi series like Dune or something, but supposedly it's real life. It was what really the Sumerian people recorded. So really fascinating. I want to get into this book, Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, The Temple of Watchers, and the Discovery of Eden by Andrew Collins. Because we're going to get into the Garden of Eden today, but how the genetic side of it, how it could have been a place, basically a lab where these Anunnaki scientists may have created humans. And supposedly that was at Göbekli Tepe. So we're going to get into that. Um, so, and there's tons of books out there like this, DNA of the Gods by Chris Hardy, where it gets into the whole Anunnaki story. And on tonight's show, like I said, I try to keep it vanilla for people that are out there that just maybe met me and heard of my show and they know nothing about all this stuff. I try not to sound too much of a lunatic to those people so that they can get eased into all of this. So I'm going to read some general versions of the Anunnaki story. So I'm trying to think first if I should get into what's going on present day with genetic manipulation that scientists have been working on, or if I should get into the Anunnaki story first. Someone's asking who is the author of the last book? That is Chris Hardy, PhD. And so that's DNA of the Gods. There's also there's some other books, not DNA of the Gods. I'm trying to think. Bloodline of the Gods. That's one I don't have here that really gets into blood types and how these different blood types may have evolved from the Anunnaki and the whole Rh negative side of that. So that's a good one to look into. Also, I'm trying to think. There's so many that I don't have here. Obviously, Graham Hancock, his Magicians of the Gods book, that was one that always really fascinated me. Oh, and of course, we can't forget Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. But online, besides all these, so a lot of these authors, they basically take the Anunnaki story and kind of are the Sumerian tablets, and then they kind of say it in their own words and describe it in their own words. But I also recommend going online and finding the actual translation of it. I believe you can find it on certain university websites. If you are looking for the real legit translation of it, you can go out there and find it. I believe there's university websites that have the real supposed accredited translation of it. So, obviously I can't read that whole entire story on tonight's show. I wish I could because it's a really epic, amazing story. But I'll just go over it. So, I really want to show you all on tonight's show how this can connect. We can connect the Anunnaki story to present day, modern day genetic manipulation that scientists are getting into. And this gets into the topic of chimeras. This gets into the topic of human animal hybrids. Yes, that's actually happening. It's really happening. There's human animal people out there in labs, and a lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but it's true. I mean, look it up anywhere. It sounds crazy, and you know people get kind of weirded out when they hear these kind of things, but it's true. There's actually people. There is a man pig, I kid you not. There's a person that is a man and a pig in a lab in China right now, along with probably many other things like that. I mean, who knows what our government's doing. It's crazy. And think about it, there's literally a man pig out there that doesn't have rights. Like maybe he wants to go roll in the mud, or he wants to go to the store and buy a nice sweater. He can't do that because he's in a lab. And it sounds crazy and it sounds like a joke, but this is some crazy stuff, you guys. And and this gets into the Anunnaki story and the myths from around the world of these chimeras that humans were terrified of in ancient times, in Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology. where do you think those chimeras came from? Do you think it's possible that an ancient race may have come to this planet at a certain time and started genetically manipulating uh, DNA? Maybe they took the early hominids, mixed it with some of their DNA and created the early humans. Maybe they started messing around, creating, manipulating with DNA and creating hybrids and chimeras. And maybe that's where all these myths came from. So I'm going to get into all of this, and it's like, wow, where do I even start here? There's so much to talk about with all this. I think I want to start with the general Anunnaki story, and then I'm going to talk about what modern day science is doing now in regards to genetics, and then we're going to link this all together. Okay, so we're going to start here. Okay, so this is a good general overview of the Anunnaki story. If you okay, so this is for, like I said, I'm going to be a little vanilla here, and I'm going to read the Anunnaki story in a very, very summarized version that is nowhere near as epic as the original version. But this is a great summary of it. So I don't really want to get any facts wrong. I could basically sit here and say it myself, but I'm just going to read this article about it. That way, it's all told in the right order. And obviously, there's a lot left out of this, but here's a general summary of this. And this is of the Sumerian tablets. So this is from the site Ancient Origins. The origins of human beings according to ancient Sumerian texts. Sumer, on the land of civilized kings, flourished in Mesopotamia, now modern day Iraq, around 4500 BC. Sumerians created an advanced civilization with its own system of elaborate language and writing, architecture and arts, astronomy and mathematics. Their religious system was a complex one comprised of hundreds of gods. According to the ancient texts, each Sumerian city was guarded by its own god, and while humans and gods used to live together, the humans were servants to the gods. The Sumerian creation myth can be found on a tablet in Nippur, an ancient Mesopotamian city founded in approximately 5000 BC. The creation of Earth, Enuma Elish, according to Sumerian tablets, begins like this. When in the height of heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Apsu, who begot them, and Chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen, and when the gods, none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. Lamu and Lahamu were called into being. Sumerian mythology claims that in the beginning, human-like gods ruled over Earth. When they came to Earth, there was much work to be done, and these gods toiled the soil, digging to make it habitable and mining its materials. The text mentioned that at some point the gods mutinied against their labor. When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great. The work was heavy and the distress was much. Anu, the god of gods, agreed that their labor was too great. His son Enki, or Ea, proposed to create man to bear labor, and so, with the help of his half-sister Ninki, he did. A god was put to death, and his body and blood was mixed with clay. From that material, the first human being was created in likeness to the gods. And imagine this when I'm saying this. This is from the Sumerians telling the story of what their understanding of what how this creation happened. So you have slaughtered a god together with his personality. I have removed your heavy work, and I have imposed your toil on man. In the clay, God and man shall be bound to a unity brought together, so that to the end of days, the flesh and the soul, which in a god have ripened, that soul in a blood kinship to be bound. The first man was created in Eden, a Sumerian word which means flat terrain. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Eden is mentioned as the Garden of the Gods and is located somewhere in Mesopotamia between Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And we're going to get to that later. Initially, human beings were unable to reproduce on their own, but after modified with the help of Enki and Ninki, thus Adapa was created as a fully functional and independent human being. This modification was done with the approval of Enki's brother Enlil, and a conflict between the gods began. Enlil became the adversary of man, and the Sumerian tablet mentions that men served gods and went through much hardship and suffering. Adapa, with the help of Enki, ascended to Anu, where he failed to answer a question about the bread and water of life. Opinions vary on similarities between this creation story and the biblical story of Adam and Eve in Eden. Okay, so that is obviously a very, very general overview of the story. And basically what it gets into when when you really read it, the detail it gets into of the actual translation of these tablets is that basically seems these alien beings, some sort of beings from off planet came here, and they must have been like us. From my understanding, they were much taller actually, and there's a lot on that. Obviously the Nephilim from biblical times. But so basically they came, and apparently I believe from the tablets they say that they use gold to power their spaceships, and I don't know if it's some sort of way of alchemizing the gold. Some sort of process they had to use it to power the ships, but apparently they used gold to power their ships. They also used it, particles of it in their atmosphere to keep their atmosphere from not working any. I guess their atmosphere, they had to put these particles up in the atmosphere, these gold particles, to keep the atmosphere kind of like locked in, because something was happening on the planet where it was deteriorating in some way. And obviously that's another thing I didn't think to put in here, but obviously there's scientists in our times are looking into doing the same thing. I know Bill Gates was looking into doing something like that. So obviously this is something that's also happening in our times that our modern day scientists are possibly working with. So obviously from the story, apparently they come here, they come through our solar system, and it shows in detail. And remember, this was written by people 5,000 years ago, this story. And in this story, it describes in detail of them coming into our solar system, seeing all the planets. I mean, how would people 5,000 years ago that supposedly didn't have telescopes or anything know how many planets were in our solar system? It even says in on these some of these Sumerian tablets, it says the exact distance between these planets. It literally says that to a T, which is 100, and it's all 100% correct. So how would they know that? Pretty crazy. But obviously they mentioned one other planet or two other planets, one which was demolished at one point. And so, the story goes that they come here, or they go through the solar system. They have some sort of technology where they can, some sort of radar technology, obviously, where they can see if there's gold on any of these planets. And they see that there's a lot of gold on Earth. So they come to Earth and they start mining the gold, and it's taking a long time. And they realize after a certain point that they don't want to keep mining this gold. It's so much work. Like, these people are probably astronauts from their planet, like astronaut scientists. They didn't, come here to be coal miners, basically. From my understanding, that's my theory. It's like, imagine like if an astronaut, and someone that went through like physics and universities, and then all of a sudden, like, there's one of our astronauts is sent out to like mine on a planet. They'd probably be like, this is not, I'm a scientist, why am I doing this? I don't know. But so obviously this went on for a while, and then supposedly, obviously these people are highly advanced if they have space travel and everything. And at one point, they're like, we don't want to work anymore. We're tired of all this. We're tired of mining. So they, I think at this point they had the early human hominids, the kind of humans that maybe more Neanderthals or Denisovians, I don't know, or maybe they're just early hominids at this point. And they took their DNA and they mixed it with the DNA, their own DNA, and created scientifically with genetic manipulation, genetic editing, or whatever you would call it, that our scientists have now. They created the first humans, or the first, humans that were more like them and less like the hominid Neanderthal types. And they used them to mine the gold. So and I'll keep going with this story, but first, because that is a point to go off of right there, I have an article to read on that. And this is article is titled "Proof That the Human Species Has Been Genetically Engineered by Anunnaki Aliens." Lloyd Pye used to say, "Everything you know is wrong," and presents evidence about what is really going on with human evolution that mainstream science won't discuss. He presents evidence that the human genome was tampered with, and he says the best story that explains why modern humans look the way they do is presented in Zachariah Sitchin's books. How modern humans got here is a big mystery and can be explained with the Anunnaki theory, according to many researchers. The best piece of evidence is not ancient archaeology of ancient Sumeria or the translations of the cuneiform text, but in the human genome itself. If we were modified, then the hard evidence has to be in the DNA. End of story, period. And here's the deal, we have the evidence. The second human chromosome is fused, making the human genome the only primate with 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, and not 48 like all the other primates, apes, and monkeys. This is not just odd, but Darwinian impossible. How can a random mutation that is so radical become dominant? This is very unlikely. With most mutations, the offspring will be less fit and die off. So, to have chromosome 2 to be a successful mutation is strange. A fused single strand of chimp2A and chimp2B is highly unlikely, and this combined with all the other extreme variations from our nearest ape relatives, it becomes highly improbable. Modern humans are unexplainable by modern normal science. There's simply no missing links between our nearest relatives that show a steady progression of adaptive features. Where where are the skull changes, the teeth changes, the bone thickness changes, or the huge brain increase changes? No, nowhere, and they won't ever find them because they don't exist. Think about it. Recent hominids should be abundant in fossil record. Neanderthals coming and going with no good predecessors is also really strange. So, how can we account for Neanderthal DNA in our DNA? We adopt the Anunnaki theory. We solve the mystery by examining what the Sumerians said with the evidence. What if the Neanderthals were one of the first self replicating robust slaves engineered by the Anunnaki? What if some of them escaped their Mesopotamia overlords and went north where we find their remains today? It is hard to dismiss the Sumerian account because of the evidence. First, the Holy Bible is the most believed holy book on the planet and is considered to be the word of God. Billions believe the authenticity of this account. The story of Earth and the rise of humanity as the dominant species is partially told in the Holy Bible as a watered down and uh, religious account. The gods who came down from the heavens became fallen angels and demons, leaving the believer in paralyzed fear of unknown otherworldly agents. The Holy Bible is basically a religious account of human origin. It makes people irritated and prone to do evil because of the text confuses the mind with irrational tales of a needy creator god. The omniscient creator god making bad angels and casting them to this world is kind of strange to say the least. Um, so this story, it just kind of gets into, does okay, let me see here. So there needs to be the discovery of older and more detailed Sumerian myth paints an entirely new picture of the creation account. It paints a very clear, detailed image of what happened, and not with the superstitious fear version. There needs to be a differentiation. The Anunnaki creators of the human species are not the same as the original creator prime. The Anunnaki were not gods, but a competing race in our solar system. When we have the DNA evidence, humans are the only primate with 46 chromosomes and the only primate without fur. Lloyd Pye made up 12 huge differences between us and apes. The most bothersome one of all is the genetic diseases that only humans have. In Darwinian progress, if Darwinian progress is the path of our origin, we wouldn't have 4,000 unique genetic disorders because they would have been selectively eliminated. Our condition is not the product of Darwinian fitness. How can the prevalence of human diseases be explained if we were genetically engineered to be slaves who were wiped out by the owners periodically? They didn't care about their mistakes. The story of the humans artificially created by Enlil and Enki, the Anunnaki overlords, as slaves explains much. It explains human diseases and human starvation and environment degradation. Humans are not natural. They don't fit here, and they are self destructive with drug use, body abuse, and environment abuse. Humans are the abandoned abominations of the Unana overlords who came and went back to their planet Nibiru. So, if Neanderthals were the first Anunnaki slave abomination, how did we come about? Well, the Sumerian text tells us exactly what happened. The gods lusted after our women and mated with them, making a new hybrid, one that is less robust and has more Anunnaki DNA. The human being is very much in the likeness of the Anunnaki gods, but inferior, smaller models. We look like Anunnaki, but also have native Earth hominid DNA. We are hybrids of the gods. Remember that all primates have 48 chromosomes and we 46 pairs. This means that Anunnaki have 46 chromosomes, which is why the modified Earth primate DNA to have one pair less. They changed our DNA to match their DNA, and then later they mated with us and created new hybrids. They even created a royal line, a hybrid with extra genes to be overlords just like them. We call this slave master race. Okay. So I'm just kind of skipping over some things here, and obviously this article is a little one-sided. Whoever created this article is a little on the the angry side of things, because they're like, hey, when you first kind of start finding out about these stories, it is a little wild to say the least. And I'm sorry, I have to skip over some of that because I don't want to bother anyone of any kind of religion. But this is just kind of getting into, I'm just kind of reading different ideas here, and I'm not saying any of these stories are 100%. And I 100% believe that humans are amazing. I mean, even if we were possibly genetically manipulated, genetically created, if we're a genetic mix between apes and, or early hominids and Anunnaki, that doesn't mean that there is no God and that we aren't souls that incarnate here. So it's I wouldn't say that humans are an abomination. And so this is kind of getting to the science of modern day science and how this all connects. And I just wanted to share the story and what people believe from Oh, and someone here mentioned obviously the giant race, the ancient race of giants. So my understanding would be that the Nephilim and the ancient race of giants would be basically probably the descendants of the the people that are more have more Anunnaki DNA. And I also have an understanding that I personally feel that maybe many extraterrestrials have come here and seeded the human race, or genetically manipulated the human race over many millennia. So I don't think it was just the Anunnaki. I don't feel that way. But I want to read this. I wanted to read this story and share this all with you because I want to connect this to modern day science and what modern day science is doing now. And Rocky Angel here says, "Thank you for saying something nice about humans compared to what most people say, Apollo." Yeah, I feel like it's like some people read that story and then they get really bothered by it. Um, but I think humans in a way are probably we probably have qualities that if all this is true that the Anunnaki would not, even if we were created to be slaves here for a while, and obviously that happened for a while and then they left after they got their gold, or maybe who knows, for all we know they could be secretly coming here and getting gold and shipping it off planet still, even in modern times. Who knows? But it's all very interesting, and I think humans. It could be very likely that humans are actually more spiritually connected than the Anunnaki would be. Maybe we have qualities that they don't, that are from our Earth lineage. So it's interesting. It really is. Um, so I want to get into the modern day aspect of this now and how this all connects because I find it really fascinating. So the reason why I pulled or went into all of this today is because of this article right here. Let me see here. Okay. So I went over this on yesterday's show. So if you're watching yesterday's show, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through it again because I think it's really fascinating. This is what really got me off on this tangent. I know I'm actually already getting to a close with tonight's show. So maybe I'll do a part 2 of this later. So this actually came out in September. And this just goes to show that modern day humans we are already achieving this technology that supposedly the Anunnaki had. And this is scientists say that they could bring back woolly mammoths, but maybe they shouldn't. Using recovered DNA to genetically resurrect an ancient species, the central idea behind the Jurassic Park films may be moving closer to reality with the creation this week of a new company that aims to bring back woolly mammoths thousands of years after the last of the giants disappeared from the Arctic tundra. Flush with a 15 million infusion of funding, Harvard University genetics professor George Church, known for his pioneering work in genome sequencing and gene splicing, hopes the company can usher in an era when mammoths walk the Arctic tundra again. He and other researchers also hope that a revived species can play a role in combating climate change. We are working towards bringing back species who left an ecological void as they went extinct, the company Colossal said in an answer to questions emailed by NPR. As Colossal actively pursues the conservation and preservation of endangered species, we are identifying species that can be given a new set of tools from their extinct relatives to survive in new environments that desperately need them. To be sure, what's being proposed is actually a hybrid created using a gene editing tool known as CRISPR-Cas9 to splice bits of DNA recovered from frozen mammoth specimens into that of an Asian elephant, the mammoth's closest living relative. The resulting animal, known as a mammophant, would look and presumably behave much like a woolly mammoth. Okay, so there you have it right there. What does that sound like? Does that not sound like the Anunnaki legend or the Sumerian legend of the Anunnaki and how the Anunnaki supposedly, spliced our DNA with, or the early hominid DNA with their DNA? That's exactly what our scientists are working on right now. And this is really fascinating. And so I wish I had more time with tonight's show. I had a lot pulled up here, but I guess we're just starting to get into it. But obviously, we also have the idea of the chimeras. We have chimeras that were in ancient civilizations around the world, and scientists are also working on this. Um, so let me get into this, and then I'll finish up the show on the topic of the ancient chimeras. Okay, so this is from The Guardian. This is actually from, I believe this was actually from a few years ago. Oh no, this is from last 2 years ago. Okay, the 5 chimeras created by science. A chimera is an organism with genetic material from 2 or more sources. Experiments in the field may save lives but are ethically controversial. Human monkey. Last week, but in 2019, researchers led by Spanish scientist Juan Carlos Ispisu Belmont announced they had created the first human monkey chimera embryos in China. The purpose of the experiment is to investigate ways of using animals to grow human organs for transplants. The organs would be genetically matched by taking the recipient's cells and reprogramming them into stem cells. Human pig. In 2017, scientists from Salk Institute in California tried to grow the first embryos containing cells from humans and pigs. The process proved to be more challenging than expected and was very inefficient. From 2075 implanted embryos, only 186 developed, up to 28-day time limit for the project. Virus chimera. Chimeras can also, okay, so I just want to get into the real. Okay, so human mouse. In March, Japan loosened its guidelines, lifting a 2-week limit on the growth of human animal chimeras and allowing the transplantation of chimeric embryos or hybrids into animals, but not humans. Pending approval, a Japanese stem cell scientist, Hiromitsu Nakachi, plans to insert human stem cells into mice or rats in an attempt to grow a human pancreas in an animal. As a safeguard, if too many human cells creep into the rat's brains, this experiment will be stopped. Okay, so, and that's just sharing what the media has put out there about what they're doing. But from my understanding, there's real chimeras that have been worked on by our government, and I know from China. In China, they have worked on these, and there's been a lot about man pigs, and I know it sounds crazy, but it's real. So there's a lot out there on that, and other governments, obviously, and it's weird because when you look online, they don't actually really get into, like, it's actually very hard to find articles on the real chimeras that are out there. And obviously, I think this has a lot to do with the ethical side of things. I think people are kind of, obviously for good reason, a little freaked out about it. But I've actually heard from whistleblowers, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I've heard a lot from certain whistleblowers that are in private conversations that there have been chimeras worked on that they saw in person on a certain level at Area 51. So I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but this is all very real, and our scientists are working on this now. So, I have about 10 minutes left of tonight's show, and I feel like I was just kind of getting started here. But, to tie all this together, obviously, in ancient times, there were the chimeras from ancient legends, and obviously, every ancient culture around the world had stories of these chimeras, of these weird hybrids between different types of animals mixed together. And there's a lot of stories of these heroes of legend fighting off these chimeras, or these hybrids around the world. And where would all these stories come from? It's like who just makes up these kinds of stories? So I think it's very likely that there was some truth to this. And from my understanding, and from the Sumerian tablets get into this, but the Anunnaki supposedly were not only genetically, scientifically splicing human DNA with their own and creating, or hominid DNA with their own, creating us, but they were messing around with DNA of other creatures too. And so I didn't get time to get into this on today's show, but in this book, Göbekli Tepe by Andrew Collins, he explains, and also Graham Hancock and many other researchers have come to the conclusion that Göbekli Tepe is the original Garden of Eden, and that the Garden of Eden story is actually, and Göbekli Tepe is obviously, if you don't know, it's this place in Turkey. I believe it's like, you know the oldest part of it's like over 100,000 years old, from my understanding. And they have, basically, from the inscriptions on the temple they've found, and this place, it's basically buried, like it was filled in with rock and buried at one point. It was purposely buried, and it was just found, I believe, like a decade ago by a farmer in Turkey. And supposedly, from what they found, from their research, from the inscriptions on the temple walls, they have come to an understanding that this may have very well been an ancient lab by these Anunnaki, where they genetically were manipulating these different beings and working with them. And they believe that this is the original, quote unquote, Garden of Eden, where they were genetically working with genetics, scientifically, and manipulating these different creatures and beings. So I definitely recommend reading this book. Again, that's Göbekli Tepe by Andrew Collins. And so, from my understanding, this is from research, all the research I've done on this topic. At one point, the Anunnaki, they left before, basically before the Great Flood. They left, and they got to a point where they're like, okay, we have everything we need. We don't need to be here anymore. This cataclysm is coming, and most of the humans are probably going to die out. Maybe they won't, but we'll just leave them to just evolve and defend for themselves. And so they left and they went back to their planet. And at that time, because they had made all these chimeras and left them there, these crazy weird creatures. And from my understanding, I really feel that, like the Iliad and the Odyssey and these ancient Greek myths, the Egyptian mythology, I think a lot of this actually came from the chimeras that had been left behind. And from my understanding, they told, I believe it's the Egyptians, they have an account of being told by these quote unquote gods to not touch these chimeras and to just leave them be. So imagine, being an early human, and there's all these like crazy creatures and you're terrified of them, but you can't really mess with them. And they're probably around for a while. It probably took a while for them to die out. So I think that's where all these stories of these Greek heroes fighting off these crazy chimeras came from. One thing that proves this, and I try to find an article on this because I don't remember which documentary I saw it in, but I also saw this in person in Egypt. But I believe it's somewhere near Luxor, and in Luxor, I believe it's near the Avenue of the Sphinxes in Luxor, where I've actually been here in Egypt. There's a place underground where, so obviously the Egyptians, they mummified everything because they really you know put great importance on the cycle of life, and they believe that everything, for it to reincarnate, it needed to be mummified. So they would mummify everything, like even the crocodiles. And they so there's this place near the Avenue of the Sphinxes in Luxor in Egypt, where basically these archaeologists, they found a mix of different animal bones mixed together. And at first they thought they were a mix of these different animal bones. And then they realized they may have been chimeras. And in this place is underground, it was buried over with asphalt. Basically just and the Egyptians, they obviously they mummified everything. So whatever it was that was put there, they did not want it to come back. And these archaeologists who found this were under the understanding that they may have very well been chimeras that these Egyptians were terrified of and didn't want to come back. So, pretty fascinating stuff. And, I really find this topic really interesting. And, so that this just gets into modern day genetics, where obviously humans are reaching the point in our technology, not just with genetics, but also with spacefaring technology. We're getting to a point where we have almost reached the levels of technological advancement that the Anunnaki supposedly had from Sumerian legend. So I thought that would be really fascinating to connect that all in tonight's show, and I hope you enjoyed this. Um, so and obviously there's so much more to the story. I highly recommend looking into all of this, and I find it really fascinating. And so in conclusion, morally, is this where humans should go? Should we start genetically creating our own beings, or bring back animals that have been extinct for millennia? It seems like it's possible at this point, and I think it's already being done. So, thanks everyone for joining tonight's show. And please, before I go, I want to remind you all to check out my shaman spears. They're on shamanspears.com if you want to support my show and help keep me going. I make these uniquely handcrafted energy channeling devices that are basically a mix between wands and spears, and that is on shamanspears.com. They're all filled with copper coils, crystals, magnets, and sand I collect from sacred places around the world. And I have a new collection up. They range from small wand size to large staff size. You can find the descriptions, the length, and all the descriptions. And I have some organite creations and more up. Again, that's on shamanspears.com. So make sure you check that out. And I'm sorry, just going through the comments here. And so thanks to everyone tonight for joining my show. I really appreciate it. It's always good to be here on Aftermath FM and Apollo's Odyssey. I'm not sure what my show will be next week. I may have a guest on, or I may do another show connecting the dots for you guys and bring you on my Odyssey, because I always enjoy that. It's always a lot of fun, right? So, and again, I will be at this conference, Rob Potter's conference in July 7th. So make sure you get your tickets for that. That is the Mount Shasta conference. I believe that's what it's called, is the Mount Shasta conference. So definitely you're going to want to check that out. And I'll be at the Conscious Life Expo this February here in LA. And I'll be here with my shaman spears, so you can come to my booth and say hi. And at both of those events, I will be speaking, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, I'll be at a conference a little later this month. So I'm going to have to go look into that. And someone here in the comments is saying, bring Carrie Cassidy on again. Yes, I would definitely love to do that. Thanks for reminding me. I have to meet with her. She's been wanting to meet up with me. All right. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. I love seeing all your comments, and it's so great to be here. And obviously I will be seeing you all again next week on another episode of Apollo's Odyssey. So until next time, over and out.